Welcome back to Let's Talk Race and Modern. I'm your host, Harrison Paul. Hey, so we're going to talk about Vinny Jr. and the Ballon d'Or. I try to stay away from this topic, maybe because I'm a viewer. I call myself a viewer of Manchester City, which means I watch all their games. I'm a huge Pep Guardiola fan. I've referenced him on the show many times before and what I learned from him and what I learned from that team, and I take into life. I think they're playing amazing football, and I'd be lying if I say I'm not in awe of the football that they play. And obviously, Rodri is a big part of that football that happens over there in Manchester City. So when I heard that Vinny did not get the award, I was conflicted because, of course, you know, as being a Pan-Africanist, my mind says he's snubbed as an African. And then my next thought is of how, exceptional Rodri is as a player. Now, because I know how much Rodri means to Manchester City in general, I think my mind was equating just his general wealth until I started to kind of, watch a few videos from other different influencers, or rather people who were commenting on it. And it kind of sobered my thinking. And I came to the understanding that the year that Rodri, I think, had his best season as of late, anybody who's watching the show for any other reasons, or I'm actually going to get into some politics and join the scene with politics, so just bear with me and just continue watching the show. But obviously for the football fans, my intersectional fans and Pan-Africanists, listen, of course we understand that Rodri had a great season for Manchester City the year of the Champions League where he scored the winning goal. Now, this is the year that I feel Rodri could have and should have won the Ballon d'Or if at any point. I understand that he didn't lose any games in the last 50 or whatever. He hadn't lost any games, right? In last season, I think no games were lost when he was in the team. So, of course, people began to just say that as if that was his best season. Personally, I think he had an even better season the season before, where they won the Champions League, if that was even the season before. So I sobered myself and began to think of listen, when we have the discussion around the best player in the world, what does that mean, And then we look back at Ronaldo's, we look back at Sergio Busquets, who is often, compared to. We look back at Seedorf, and we look back at Makalele, we look back at great players. And I wanted to actually dodge doing this video because I never wanted to come across as if I am, undermining someone's gift and someone's talent. So even as I'm saying now, it's very difficult for me to sit up here and say, well, Sergio's better or where Makalele is better. And I think that's quite unfair. But what I will say today, and this is for now my Pan-Africanists, I'm having a conversation with a brother today just about it. And as we're talking about it, and I wanna actually make it clear that I agreed with this brother as we spoke the subject, and it was only the minute we walked away from the conversation that this revelation came to me in that moment, and we spoke about it, and he was like, there's some players. Basically, he was saying, there's some players who have spikes of goodness, whereas sometimes another player may not have as high spikes as what we would expect, as the other player did, but his level of consistency will maintain. So you might have a guy who plays at a level 7 maybe, but he plays on that level 7 consistently. Then you have a guy who's wowing on a 9, 8, 9 some games, and then dropping down to a 6 other games, and it sounded like a really good argument, and I agree with him of maybe it's just that consistency. And I said, even the fact that Rodri had not lost any games was probably evident of his consistency. And it was a black brother, of course, as you can imagine. And it was only when we walked away from the conversation that I said to myself, and because we kind of signed off the conversation with saying, and And all he has to do now is just make sure that he works harder and gets to that next level, you know. And if he just works harder and gets let this kind of defeat kind of motivate him, and he'll get the next one, and he'll work harder and he'll go again. And we're like, and we both agreed on that. Yeah, he should. Yeah, that's it. You know, let him kind of go back in the cave. Let him take this pain or this disappointment, and let him fuel him to go harder. And it was that sentiment that we ended on of like, take the pain, take the pain from this, and allow it to fuel you. Sorry, it reminded me in that moment as I walked away. I was able to understand that this is what we do all the time, isn't it, as Africans? This is the story of our lives, is that we have to work twice as hard to get half as much. You ever heard that saying, and how African parents have always let us know that you got to be careful, because if they call anybody on the street for doing crime, you do more years than those other boys. You know, you knew when your parents were slapping you or belting you, anybody who went through some physical discipline, some good old-fashioned discipline, you knew that was out of love. And now that you've grown up, you realize your parents understood from their own lives that they lived in white society, that they knew that maybe in the workplace, be it anywhere, that whatever they did, it would definitely stick out like a sore thumb. Whatever sin they had, whatever wrongs they had, even in the workplace, if they didn't do something correctly, it was a bigger deal. And they felt the weight of what it felt like to live in Western society. And then they tried to really discipline us hard and strong. As my mother would always say, I got to discipline you here, because one day out there, I'm not going to have no mercy on you. And they understood that the mercy would not be there for her black boys or her black girls. And then we often get upset with our parents and think, well, you put us through so much. And I think this is why it's important for the African child to have a state of consciousness, because he then will appreciate his mother or father for what they went through as Africans, not just for parenting, but and the deeper sense of understanding that they were operating, in a mind frame that was formed and shaped by colonialism. That sounds deep, isn't it? How is that possible? Well, you move to a new country, a country that is only further ahead than your own country due to its exploitation of your countries in Africa, and then you go there to try and catch up and make money and build your family and build certain things here in the West, and then you're, like I said, you're overanalyzed, micromanaged. And it can be stressful. And as we were having that conversation, the brother and I, and we signed off with that tone, thank God, like I said, I operate in a state of consciousness, because I just said, doesn't this sound familiar? And I want to say this because he may see this episode, so I just want to make sure know that, like, it's not that I fake agreed with him and then now I'm kind of ousting him or whatever. I fully agreed with him in that conversation, and it was only when we kind of signed off of like, yeah, he must work harder. When he works harder, he can, you know what I mean? Yeah, he'll do it then. And he goes, okay, later, bro, take care. And I just walked away for a second. I said, don't that sound familiar? It was like in that moment, don't that sound familiar? Go on, black man, do twice as much. And then I asked myself the next question as I went to the Uniro by myself, and I was thinking, because we all have super deep thoughts as we're standing over the urinals, and I said to myself, if a white boy had played as good as Vinny, with that flamboyancy, with that swagger, with that smile on his face like a Brazilian, would he struggle to get a Ballon d'Or? Or let's say a British boy played with such swagger. Do you think he'd struggle to get that Ballon d'Or? Let's say a Spanish boy played with white boy, European boy played with such swagger and flamboyancy, and it was unexpected. Maybe it's expected from a black boy to play that sort of level of flamboyancy. Maybe we know you boys have flamboyancy and flagrant. Maybe we know you guys have that. So now, Vinny, you got to do twice as much. And I was having another conversation with another brother of mine. Actually, we're having a great conversation, And he's a friend of mine who just came from Africa. I've referenced it on the show before, and he was kind of telling me, in Africa, brother, we don't sleep. That's how I know that this place, they're stealing from our people. In Africa, I came here, I see things close at 10 o'clock. 10 o'clock. Go to 10 o'clock. In Africa, things don't sleep. All night, people are working all the way on the clock. And he goes, that's how I knew. So it's like, somehow then we're still framed as lazy people. And it's true, because anyone who I know from back home in Africa, they work the land, they toil the land, they do all these things. There's a lot of activity going back. So I'm so happy I'm finally connecting dots of like, even when you look at the statistics here in the West, the people who are consistently, I put up on the screen, who do the night shifts most consistently are the minorities, the Africans. So my question is then, how do these narratives begin about our incompetence and our laziness? And then how is it that we always, when we do good, we're never really recognized for it, and we got to do double the amount to get recognized for it? So I'm not making this about Rodri. I'm making this about Vinny Jr. I'm making this about the plight of a black boy. If Phil Foden was as good as Vinny Jr., because we know that Phil is great, but as of now, I think Vinny Jr. has played far better world-class football than Foden. Do you think, with all the airtime that Foden is getting at this moment, do you think they would deprive Foden if he cranked it up to that level? Do you think if Mason Mount played like that? Do you think if, I don't know, name me a Spanish boy who's, I'm trying to see this, guys, and it's I think when we think about racism, our mind instantly jumps to think about somebody thinking in their mind, I don't like this person because he's black, so I'm not going to choose him. Or I don't like this person because of their skin. Ew, black skin, don't like it, I'm racist. Like a simple math that goes on. But sometimes there's like these, what we call unconscious biases. There's a bias there that's unconscious. That if the roles were reversed, we'd really get to see how they feel about his gift. Now, for the most chunkiest part of today, we're going to talk about Kamala Harris. What I wanted to speak about with Kamala Harris, we judge Kamala Harris on a different meter, rate, standard than we judge Donald Trump. And if people are wondering why I'm able to have any form of admiration, any form of appreciation for what Kamala Harris is, I thoroughly believe it's because I've decolonized my mind. Because I've decolonized my mind, I've arrived at a place where I finally feel like I'm judging my own people with the same meter in which they judge their own people. Donald Trump has done so much, yet has so much grace. I want to know the question of, let's say Donald Trump even got 50% of the grace that he has now. Let's say he did 50% of the damage that he has done up until this point. I still think he would not have done, or would not be as messy as Kamala Harris. So it lets me know that Kamala Harris not being even as half, and I think Trump actually would have double the followers. A lot of his messiness pushes him away a lot more people than he could have. And if he reduced that and he had 50%, I think a lot more people would say he's rough around the edges, but it's Trump. And he's a good guy with a good intention. But Kamala has to be squeaky clean. Obama has to be squeaky clean. So my brothers and sisters, if you're wondering like, how could you, maybe I just want for once to judge my own people with the same level of benefit of the doubt that I see the other races judge their own people. Oh, they are. I'm actually proud to give black people the benefit of the doubt. I'm proud. I see it be done on the other side. I see it takes half as much for them to get the Ballon d'Or. I see it takes half as much for them to get even in the bad books. And it takes half as much for us to get in the bad books. And it takes double the amount to really solidify. And if you were really looking at this with a fair goggle, I think, my brothers and sisters, you would be far more concerned with the fact that we have an election with two peoples who are so far away from each other character-wise. And it seems like, I think that's a form of unconscious bias that people kind of want to so focus on taking down Kamala and taking her down and whatnot, that for me personally, and I always say this, it's not because I don't care about Gaza, because remember, Africa's being exploited as well. We got people dying as well. It's just not news anymore. It's become so normal, it's no longer news. So before you think it's like, no, because there's a genocide in Gaza, there's been genocides in Africa for a very long time. And the Western world have been the ones orchestrating those genocides. So this is not new of the Western world to do such a thing. But with taking all that into account, that we are living in a genocidal Western world that imposes democracy on places in Africa, this is not old news. That they manipulate, they abuse power, and they go in, they kill, and they steal, and they destroy. I'm not going to act like it's brand new news just because a black woman was in office when it happened. And a lot of you are like, look what they did. They sent bombs on, Obama put bombs on Africa. How many other American, it's an American agenda to leave bombs on Africa. So people are applying themselves to a system that is already there. Now, here's what you're probably expecting from me. I would have a greater respect for the likes of Kamala and Obama if they can go in and they can be brave enough to stop the bombs. But I also understand that that's a more complex thing than to stop what they do. That's far more complex. That's why I always say that I believe these ones we have now are the ones who are priming us from the days that someone will go in and do something so radical as to stop the bombs. I have a friend of mine again who was telling me about an African leader. I have to get his name up on the screen. He, wonderful man, he's explaining to me how this man was recently killed in 2021, and I had absolutely no clue about this. I was embarrassed, shocked. And he was telling me of all the great things he wanted to do for Africa and all the things, and they killed him. And he told me how he wept when they killed him. And it makes me think, my brothers and sisters, of why we try to why we try to simplify a very complex thing like white supremacy. Why do we try to oversimplify dismantling white supremacy? I don't mind if certain brothers feel like we can dismantle it from the outside, and there's some of us who believe that we have to infiltrate it in order to dismantle it. But we should never simplify it. They should just do A, B, C, D. Listen, the only people who I'm upset with are the likes of Kemi Badenoch, the likes of Candace Owens, who tried to be this echo and this championing this aggressive culture towards us. And when that culture, the foundation of that culture of aggression towards black people, it produces far worse than we're seeing right now. This is why I always say the foundation we must set first is a change in culture. And once we change a culture where we must respect black people, we must understand that black people have just as much of a right to certain places, certain heights, or certain areas as we do. I think then the culture begins to change of like, then why is it we're not respecting Africa on the world stage? Why is it that Africa is still being bullied in amongst the IMF and the world organizations? But right now, we have not even shifted the culture where things like this can go under the market, go under the carpet, and no one really loses sleep to think, goodness me, are we really living in a world? The same way brown babies are dying in Palestine. It doesn't really matter because we've desensitized ourselves and dehumanized black and brown people to a degree where if it was white kids being bombed like this, if the images we were seeing were blonde children from UK or from Ireland, it would distress us even more. These are the things that we have to fix first before we can get people to actually get this level of urgency. We must shift the culture, shift and decolonize people's minds. So my thing is, when we understand the complexity of this, when leaders die when they try to free us, why is it that we think that the first people who have gotten in, the first black woman and the first black man, are going to be the ones to change everything? Surely that doesn't make sense. For systems that have been being built and put together and pieced together firmly for centuries are going to be dismantled after the first black president, American president, and the first black female American president? Is that even realistic? No. But here we go again. This is you judging your own people with a stronger and a tougher metric than you judge Donald Trump or white people themselves. It's in us. We are judging at the higher rate. What? I'm proud to not be judging Kamala Harris the same way white people don't judge their own. They're not sitting around, crying. I don't want to say crying because there are tragedy things happening. But basically, I just think that it's just rich that we take out the context of the fact that, oh, we have a powerful system here that we've been trying to kill from the outside for a very long time. It's impossible, and now we have some who are trying it from the inside. Let's take out the context of that complexity, and let's just blame her for not getting the job done and not doing perfectly, not doing swiftly. She got a whole country that is controlled. Please, I know people don't like this. She's got the Jewish people have huge stakes in America. That's a fact. For her to turn around and not to say that tired line that we've heard over and over again, when we get rid of the hostages, that is literally, her life depends on that sentence. Her life depends on that sentence. It's not her country. It's not her country. Her life depends on that sentence. Saying that sentence first is a non-negotiable. We're trying to get the hostages out. It's a non-negotiable. So I'm not going to sit around and judge them. I'm going to judge them with a similar metric to how white people judge theirs. I think in turn, in the long run, in the bigger picture, when we are less hard on ourselves, when we penalize ourselves, we crucify each other, we can't trust each other, I think in the grand scheme of things, we create a better culture of trust and confidence in one another, that we will actually be confident to build with one another. And this will be the last thing that I say before I sign off this episode. A lot of people don't understand how hard it is to get black people to turn their backs on white supremacy. They control the world, they control the system, the social structures, racial structures, racism, structural racism. Controls this world on a world organization level, on an institution level, you name it. That it is built in every black person that denying myself to move and shape myself to this system that really is the only way I can succeed in this life. I've got to be educated to what they deem as education. I've got to conduct myself in a manner or in a way of speaking that they seem intelligent, and they seem as civilized, and they've given us an idea of civilization. This is so deep in each African's mind. You think you're gonna start a revolution before you fix that in the majority of African minds? So as we are decolonizing the mind of the world, African, and in the world in general, it's gonna take some general steps. Now, I got respect for people who believe in, class struggle organizing, but I will not sit here and say Kamala is not the best option for now. In fact, today I'm going to mention Dr. Cornel West. I love him. I actually would have preferred Dr. Cornel West. But unfortunately, the world is not ready for Dr. Cornel West. And that's something that we have to be honest about. In a different generation, Dr. Cornel West, we've primed the world to arrive at that space. So, listen, guys, this whole thing of we've internalized our oppression. I started with the Vinny and how the Ballon d'Or was not given to him, and how brother and I were speaking about it, like, yeah, he needs to work harder. We've internalized this thing. Now we judge our own with this tougher ruler, and they judge their own. I'm proud, actually. Not proud of the genocide. Not proud of what the exploitation of Africa. I'm proud of this messed up system that we have, messed up situation that we have to work with, penny scraps to work with. And this is the best that we can come up with, and I'm not going to over accredit her a lot of the rubbish to a black man and black woman as if they really have any other choice at this moment. Some people won't like that, but that's all I have to say. Anyway, please make sure you like, share, and subscribe. Thank you so much for watching. And I'm on a mission for you.